Section 13.6 notes. We are jumping into this chapter just for one section because it goes along with the rules of a circle. So the first theorem states that the equation of a circle whose center is hk and whose radius is r, the equation is, in parentheses, x minus h squared plus y minus k squared equals r squared. So if we look at this, your center is right here. It's h comma k, which means h is the x value. So from here, we can say to here, that's your h value. And then from here to here, that's your k value. For the radius, that's just whatever the distance between these 2 points would be. This point on the circle, if you have x, y, well, for that specific point, the x coordinate would be this much, and the y coordinate would be about that much. Okay, we're going to find the equation of a circle whose center is 1, 5, and who has a radius of 4. This equation, honestly, is just plugging your information into the equation we gave you up on top. This would be h, that would be k for the center, and then 4 would be the radius. So it would be x minus 1 in parentheses squared plus y minus 5 in parentheses squared is equal to 4 squared. So when you write the final equation, the only thing that you can complete is 4 squared. So everything stays the same, and we make it equal to 16. All right. This time we want to find the center whose radius of a graph and the radius of a graph of x minus 3 squared plus y plus 7 squared is equal to 64. So the center is going to be 3 comma, remember the equation is y minus k. So if we have a positive 7, that means it would be a negative 7 for the center, because technically it would be y minus negative 7 in order to be y plus 7. All right, and then their radius, 64 is equal to the radius squared. Therefore, the radius is going to be 8. And realize that, so this is your center. For this, in algebra, right here, this means r times r. So really, it could be 8 or negative 8. In geometry, you're talking about a circle. You cannot tell me that the radius of a circle is negative number. So therefore, we're only going to use the positive answer. Okay, example 3. It states that they want us to find the center and the radius of the graph of x squared minus 4x plus 4 plus y squared minus 10x plus 25 all equal to 10. Okay, let's factor these. If I was going to factor this, that would be x minus 2 times x minus 2, which I can write as x minus 2 squared. Over here, for the y's, and this is a typo, this should say y. So this would be y minus 5 times y minus 5. So I can rewrite this as y minus 5 squared. So now we have in parentheses x minus 2 squared plus in parentheses y minus 5 squared. And for the 100, we could write this as 10 squared. Now we have the equation, which I gave you at the top of your notes. The center will be at 2, 5, because they're both minus subtraction signs, and your radius is already a number squared, so that'll just be 10. All right, for example 4, we need to remember how to complete the square. So if you have a formula, let's just do a little review. I'm going to put the review, we'll do it in red, right up here. Completing the square. So the formula for completing the square is going to take remember the standard form is ax squared plus bx plus c for a quadratic equation. we are going to complete the square by taking b, you divide it by 2, and then whatever that number is, you square it. So for example, if I had x squared plus 6x and I wanted to complete that square, you would take the 6, divide it by 2, which is 3, and square that to get 9. Once you get 9, in order to complete this, you would add it here, and now this is completing the square. I am going to show you a quick video using algebra tiles because I feel like completing the square in algebra tiles is a great way to show you what it really means when they say completing the square. So this just takes about 3 minutes. If you remember, represents x squared. So this would be x squared, and each one of these green rectangles would be just x. So we'd have x, x. All right, we have x squared plus 6x. So when they call it completing the square, I want to take these algebra tiles and I want to make them into a square. So right now when they're lined up, it looks like this rectangle. But what if we manipulate these and move them? So let's move this. If I move this here, and I lose my x's, but that's okay. This didn't make it look exactly like a square, unfortunately. So how do you think we can manipulate it and make it look like a square? Well, if somebody said, why don't you rotate these, that would work. So now I have my x squared plus 6x rearranged so that 3 of the x's have moved horizontally. Okay, this still is not a square. I need to complete it. Well, what I showed you on your notes is you would take the b coefficient, so that's 6 divided by 2, you end up with 3, and then you square 3 to get 9, which means I need to add 9 to this expression in order to complete the square. Oh, check it out. If I added 9 squares there that are represented by 1, that would complete it, which I happen to have right here. So if I highlight this, let's see if I move it up there. So when I move these, you now see that we have completed a square, and we have x squared plus 6x plus 9 to complete that expression. For example 4, we're going to find the center and the radius of a graph of x squared minus 8x plus y squared minus 10y equal to 8. We are going to use the method of completing the square to figure out what the center and the radius is. Let's rewrite this equation with some spaces. So I'm going to write x squared minus 8x, and I'm going to leave a space because I want to complete the square for that portion. Then I want to write plus y squared minus 10y, leave a space because I have to complete another square, equals 8. So let's first deal with the x's. The b coefficient would be negative 8. So let's do negative 8 divided by 2 gives you negative 4. When you square that, you end up getting 16. Now I'm going to add 16 here to complete the square, but whatever I do to the left side, I must also do it to the right side. So I'm going to add 16 here. On the left side, I am going to add 16, but I like to write it like plus negative 4 squared. So I like to write it this way. And the reason being is we are going to factor right here. So just for this one time, you could have written x squared minus 8x plus 16. Same thing as plus negative 4 squared. And if I said factor this, okay, well, we have x and x in front, and then what numbers multiplied together give you 16, and when added together give you negative 8? And the answer is negative 4 and negative 4. So then this would turn into as x minus 4 squared. If I keep it like this, negative 4 squared right here, that automatically tells me how to factor it. I could just go into x minus 4 squared right away. If you feel like doing it this way, by all means, go ahead. All right, so let's try it with the y's. Our b coefficient for our y's is negative 10. Negative 10 divided by 2 is negative 5. We're going to square that to give you 25. I'm going to add the 25 to the right side. And on the left side, I'm going to add 25, but I'm going to put it in the form of negative 5 squared. So when I factor that, it's just going to be y minus 5 squared. So it's just a quicker way. Like I said, if you did y squared minus 10y and you added the 25, that's fine. This would be y minus 5 times y minus 5, which is y minus 5 squared. Okay, so now on the left side, we have in parentheses x minus 4 squared plus y minus 5 squared equals, and on the right side, 8 plus 16 is 24. 24 plus the 25 gives us 49. So from this equation, I know my center is going to be 4, 5, and the radius, well, r squared is equal to 49 because remember that equation equals r squared. So it's equal to 49, which means the radius is 7. And that is how you find your center and your radius. For example 5, they want you to graph the circle represented by x squared plus y squared minus 6x minus 4y equal to negative 12. And you might be thinking to yourself, I have no idea how to do this. You can do this though. I've shown you how to get an equation that gives you the center of a circle and the radius. So if I know the center and I know the radius, I can draw a circular graph. So let's first put the two x's together. So we have x squared minus 6x. Let's leave a space and now put the two y's together. We have y squared, so we'll plus y squared minus 4y, leave a space, equals negative 12. All right, I left those spaces so that I can complete both of those, completing the squares. So let's take negative 6, divide by 2, you get negative 3, and then you're going to square that to get 9. So I'm going to add 9 to the right side. I also have to add 9 to the left side, but I'm going to add it in the form of negative 3 squared. This allows me to factor this part as x minus 3 squared. For the y's, we have negative 4 as our b coefficient. We'll divide that by 2. So you get negative 2. Now you're going to square that, equals 4. So let's add 4 to the right. And on the left side, I'm going to still add 4, but in the form of negative 2 squared. Now when I factor this, I get y minus 2 squared. All right, let's add all of this on the right side together. So here we have negative 12, and then this is 13. So negative 12 plus 13 is 1. That means that the center of our circle is going to be at 3, 2, and the radius, well, 1 is equal to r squared, so r is equal to 1. So we have a radius of 1. You can easily graph this. Go over to the right 3, up 2, that's the center. Then you have a radius that's just 1 unit. So that's the radius all around it. So that would be your circle. That's a pretty bad circle. Let me try to draw it again. All right, good enough. Example 6. Example 6 says, find the circumference to the nearest tenth of the circle represented by this equation. 3x squared plus 3y squared plus 6x minus 18y equals 15. If we want to find the circumference, okay, well, circumference is equal to, we can say 2 pi r, so all we need to find is the radius. Not a problem. When you look at all of these terms in this equation, they're all divisible by 3. So let's first divide everything by 3, and we can do this because we're going to do it to every term on the left side and every term on the right side. So divide by 3, divide by 3. We end up with x squared, and let's put the x's together right away. So here we have 2x, and then leave a space, plus y squared, and then when we divide here, we get minus 6y. Leave a space, equals 15 divided by 3, 5. All right, now let's complete the square. So 2 divided by 2 is equal to 1, and when we square that, we get 1. So I'm going to add 1 over here, add 1 squared to this side, which allows me to factor this as x plus 1 squared. For the y's, we have negative 6 divided by 2, which gives you negative 3. When you square that, you get 9. Let's add 9 to the right, and on this side, add negative 3 squared. When we factor this, we get y minus 3 squared. For the right side, we have 5 plus 1 is 6. 6 plus 9 is 15. So, great. The center, which they're not asking for, but let's just write it. The center would be at negative 1, 3, because realize this is x minus negative 1 if it was x plus 1. So we have negative 1, 3 for the center, and then r squared is equal to 15, which means our radius would be the square root of 15, because you take the square root of both sides to get r alone. All right, so let's plug that into the circumference formula. Circumference equals 2 pi times the square root of 15. So the exact answer would be that. If they ask you to round, let's say round to the nearest tenth, you would plug that into your calculator and you would get, it's approximately 24 3/10. Depending on how they ask you. So this specifically said round to the nearest tenth. We'll give that as our answer, but if it had you leave it in exact terms, you just leave 2 pi root 15. Okay, we're going to go the opposite way in example 7. So example 5, I told you to graph it. This time they're telling you to write the equation from the graph. Okay, so let's look at this. We know that our center is at 6, 0. The radius is how much? So from here to here, if x is 2 and it goes to 6 to get to the center, that means this is 4 units long. So your radius is equal to 4. So now you just plug all that information into your equation. The r is 4, 6 is h, 0 is k. So we have x minus 6 in parentheses squared plus y minus 0 in parentheses squared is equal to r squared, which is 4 squared. X minus 6 squared, and for this one, y minus 0 is just y. So you can write plus y squared there equals 16. And that's your answer for the equation if you're given a circle graph. This concludes your notes for section 13.6.